Roll call, so members present, so Lenny Arnold,
Present.
Lisa Colorado,
Present.
Margaret Schneider,
Present.
Charles Mason,
Present.
Alexandra Bobo.
Present.
All right, and then I believe Loy McKinley.
Present.
All right, and then I know that we have an alternate too, Matt Tashar.
He's an alternate, but he's obviously not here today. Thank you.
Okay. All right, and then are we good to do the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. Can I have a flag, please?
We don't have a flag. They took our flag. Oh, jeez.
I don't know where they keep that. Maybe in that same room. I don't know. It's sometimes behind that thing.
There it is.
Yeah.
Lauren's got it.
I care what stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so first order of business is approval of the July 10th, 23 Planning Board minutes.
I move to approve the minutes of July 10th, 2023.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next up is approval of the agenda. Do you have a motion?
I move to approve the agenda for the meeting of December 4th.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Next up is unfinished business. We don't have any. So up next is new business. Orientation.
Yes.
So I want to introduce Attorney Garrett Olson. He's going to give us our orientation for the planning board, and that's because we have some new members here today, or a new member.
All right, very good. All right, good evening, everyone. For many of you, this is going to be repetitive to board trainings you guys have had previously. Not much has changed in this area, unfortunately. It's quite a lengthy presentation. I know it's scheduled for about an hour. I'm going to try to get as close to an hour as possible. So I'm going to move through this pretty quickly. If you have any questions, anything stands out to you as maybe different than your current understanding, raise your hand, stop me, cut me off, do whatever, and we can discuss it. All right, so this evening we're going to very briefly be covering three major topics, and the first of which is going to be the government and the sunshine law, open meetings law, right? Florida's sunshine law, as it's called. And just as a note, I dropped my business card off with my cell phone number on the back of it for each and every one of you. If there's ever a question that you have moving forward about, hey, is this a violation? Should I have this conversation? Is that text I sent a public record that I need to send to the custodian of records for the city? Don't strain, just call me. Available 24/7 for you guys, and if you give me a call or shoot me an email, I'll try to get back to you same day, definitely within 24 hours. All right. What is the Sunshine Law? What does it do? Well, it provides a right of access to to government meetings for our public, right? It applies to elected boards like our city commission, and it applies to appointed boards like the planning board. General rule that you should keep in your head is that all meetings at which official acts are taken or public business is transacted or discussed shall be open and noticed to the public. So what does that mean? There are a lot of words there. that you can interpret pretty broadly, right? What's a meeting, right? When is something discussed? Sunshine Law applies to any meeting between two or more members of the same board when discussing matters that may foreseeably come before the board, right? So that may be a particular zoning petition that is noticed on the agenda. That may be a comprehensive plan amendment that is up for review that the city commission discussed meeting before, okay? Pretty broad amount of topics can fall under what may foreseeably come before the board. So keep that in mind. What's a meeting? This is where most folks get in trouble with the Sunshine Law, right? Meeting includes what you'd think: city commission meetings, workshops, planning board meetings, workshops. It could also be a telephone call between two of you. Could be a text message, could be an email. Even running into each other at the Surfing Santas in a couple of weeks, you guys might say a couple things to each other. That could potentially be a meeting. And it all depends what you're talking about. So we have to be careful. This, again, just reiterating the basic requirements here, right? Meetings have to be open to the public, okay? You have to have reasonable notice of the meetings. And the third requirement is that minutes of the meetings have to be taken, and then they have to be available for public inspection. You're not. So we're going to do a quick hypothetical, just to see if you guys are staying sharp here early on. So just briefly read that, and then when you spot the issues, just shout out what the issues are here. Does anyone see any issues?
I do. So Sue and Jim are talking about us not together about an issue that's coming to the board about the rezone. They're talking about it, not in a public forum.
Are they talking about it though? I mean, Mary's talking to Sue, her neighbor, who's...
I thought it said at the end, Sue tells Jim it's not looking good for that rezone. Mary said she would never vote for it. Is that not talking about it?
So Sue is the town planner. Remember, we can go back here. Sunshine Law applies to any meeting between two or more members of the same board. So let's fast forward. Is the conversation between Jim and Sue problematic?
No.
Think about it. What's Mary telling Sue to do?
She's influencing
Yeah,
before the subject is discussed by the board.
That's right. So you guys spotted the issue. It's the conversation between Sue and Jim, right? But Mary's at fault here too, because we're going to learn that you all are allowed to communicate with members of staff, right? We're your resource. We're always here to answer questions about something that might be upcoming on an agenda item, maybe not quasi-judicial matters. We'll talk about that later on. But you can talk with us. The only thing is, you cannot ask me to say, hey, Garrett, what's going on with that rezone? If you talk to anyone else on the board, how are they going to vote, right? You can't use staff or any other person, for that matter, as an intermediary to pass along information, right? That the Florida legislature has determined that is a meeting outside of the sunshine. So if we go back, you can see where Mary told Sue to tell Jim, right? Let the other board members know of her disapproval and her intent to vote no, right? That's an issue. That's a violation under Florida Sunshine Law. Sue telling Jim it's not looking good for that one rezone, that's a violation of Sunshine Law, okay? This is more information, not for you guys. You guys don't get to decide where the meetings are at, but meetings generally have to be accessible to the public, adequate size. We have a big enough room here for everyone here tonight, and we can't discriminate or restrict access to the public, okay? You can't say, oh, well, you're not a resident of Cocoa Beach. You don't get to come watch our meetings. That is not allowed, right? So we shouldn't be having these meetings in private homes and restaurants, over the phone on your way to work, right? That's not going to cut it. We're also not gonna restrict non-disruptive videotaping, tape recording, photography, right? Sometimes if we have a big item that comes up, news may pop by, Channel 6, Channel 35, that is all okay under Florida Sunshine Law. Right to public comment. This says newer, but 2013 is not exactly new stuff here. In 286, which is where Sunshine Law is enacted in Florida statutes, it says that members of the public shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard on a position before the Board of Commission. Okay? It doesn't have to happen at the same meeting. It generally always does. But it needs to be within at least a reasonable proximity in time before the meeting at which the Board or Commission takes the official action. As you will see later tonight when our staff gives you their procedures, and as many of you know, we do public comment right away. And this is always worth noting. You know, the board is allowed to promulgate rules keeping decorum, right? No one can come up here and shout expletives at you. But there's no exemption for people being really critical, people being really mean. And people are entitled to their public comment, as we see right here. So while we're allowed to restrict the amount of time that they are up here giving their opinion, we cannot really control the content beyond keeping decorum. Just keep that in mind. I just talked about all that. All right, let's talk about the penalties. Don't commit a Sunshine Law violation. Don't let your neighbor coax you into telling them your position so that they can share it with their other board member friend. It's not worth it. I know no one on this board would do that, but it bears repeating. An unintentional violation is a non-criminal infraction, penalty up to $500. An intentional violation can land you in jail, so don't do it. There is a city in South, is it South? It might be North Indian River County. A couple commissioners are in jail right now because of Sunshine Law violations. So keep that in mind. Also, if you're so inclined to learn, that if you commit a Sunshine Law violation, the act that was approved or disapproved, right, the vote that approves or disapproves a particular action is void, ab initio, all right? That is the legislature telling you all that even if you think you succeed, eventually you will fail. So that is another penalty under the Sunshine Law. We blew through that. Not everything that we usually have on our normal slides is on here tonight, given our time constraints, but just generally keep in your head that your discussions with board members, including alternate members, right, is subject to the Sunshine Law. Your conversations with staff, with me, right, not subject to the Sunshine Law as much, but you cannot use us as an intermediary to communicate things to other board members. You can talk with members of other boards, okay? If the mayor gives you a call and wants to chat about your day and chat about a rezone, that's completely fine. Just be cautious when you're talking to members of the public. Obviously, Florida has very broad laws that allow public access to its elected and appointed officials. So feel free to discuss with them whatever you'd like. Just be very careful in sharing how you're going to vote on something, because you don't know why they're coming up to you to ask you questions. Any questions? No? Awesome. And this is new for you, correct? Correct. All right. So we can talk after the meeting, but if you have questions, let's talk. All right, so now we're going to talk about Chapter 112, Public Records. Florida's Public Records Act is probably the most expansive, like the Sunshine Law, in the whole country. It is enshrined in our Constitution, and the only exceptions are those established by our legislature or that are enshrined in our Florida Constitution. It applies to the state legislature, it applies to all judges, it applies to state and local governments, it applies to appointed officers such as yourself. So let's learn about them. What is a public record? As you can see here, pretty much everything is a public record. The thing you want to key on is in that fourth line, right? Made or received pursuant to law or ordinance, or in connection with the transaction of official business by any agency, all right? Florida Supreme Court has interpreted that word salad as meaning a public record is any material made or received by an agency, so think about yourself as an agency, in connection with official business, which are used to perpetuate, communicate, or formalize knowledge. It's a little more word salad, but I guess it's better than our prior definition. So what does that mean? All materials, whether it's in a final form, draft form, are open for public inspection unless they are exempted from disclosure. Important note, there's no, this is a really embarrassing comment I made on this public record. Garrett, can I exempt that from disclosure? The answer is no, all right? And there's a fun story, that's not my story, but I stole it from Wade Vos, who's one of the partners at the firm. He was doing some Orange County board work, and during a very contentious meeting, two board members, after public comment, one board member wrote something down on a legal pad, showed his buddy sitting next to him. The meeting went on. At the end of the meeting, they voted on this contentious item to the disappointment of that public commenter. That individual ran up to the dais immediately following the meeting, slammed his hand on the table and said, "I want to see what that note was."
I have a question on the last slide.
Oh,
What qualifies for being an exemption?
say that again?
What would qualify for being an exemption?
Oh, we're going to get into that.
Okay.
It's a long list, but they're all very narrowly construed. So we'll get into that then. It's a good question. But anyways, finish story. Individual demanded to see the note immediately, to which they looked at Wade, and Wade looked at what the note was about, and he said, it's a public record, they get to inspect it. Was it really embarrassing? Yeah. Did it make the news the next day? It did. But guess what? Law's the law. Particularly, and we're going to talk about notes at the very end because I think it's important to really drill down on it, right? A written material, right, a written note that is used to communicate knowledge is a public record. So that note that was scribbled down, that was shared with his colleague during the meeting, that makes that page of notes, that little portion where he wrote the note, public record. And subject to disclosure, right? So if someone has a public records request, they can come and get copies of records, but also inspection. And the timeline for inspection is a reasonable time to produce the documents. And in the moment, right there with the attorney for the board present, a request was made, and that's when it gets that's when it's open for inspection. So be very careful taking certain notes down that you may share with folks on the board. I would advise against that. If you receive any text messages during the meeting, I really advise to keep your phone in your pocket because folks don't know who's sending you the text message. They don't know if it's a message from an alternate member in the audience. They don't know if it's a timed message from another member of the board. So, just to get rid of all the speculation, we always advise that unless it's an absolute emergency, no texting during the meetings. All the emails you send to and from the planning office, any emails you send to me, those are all public records. I won't really get into this too much, but just know if you create a public record, either intentionally or unintentionally, it's very important that you preserve it, okay? So if you send a text message to someone on planning staff, hey, not going to be able to make it to the meeting tonight, sorry, take a screenshot of the text. Because we don't know if someone on the city side is going to be able to retain that text. But if you're sending text messages about official business, those are public records. It's always easier just to do it in email because all the city's emails are archived on the back end. The city can get sued if we do not timely produce public records that are requested. They could bring a civil action against the city, and the main issue is that it usually makes the news, and they are entitled to their attorney's fees under Chapter 119. Also, it's a crime. Again, you can go to jail, you can be fined, or both. So I don't know why the exceptions are not on the slide, but to answer your question from earlier, there are a number of exemptions that are listed in Florida statutes. It mainly revolves around protected information like social security numbers, medical health information, addresses of certain folks with the city, so like law enforcement, the city attorney, all of those addresses are exempted. There are two main exemptions to records. There are attorney-client exemption, so if the city has an active lawsuit against some person out there and that person wanted to see all of our internal memorandum to get a leg up on our litigation strategy, oh, let's just go do a public records request for all the city attorney documents this year, right? Legislature said you don't get those documents until after the litigation is over. That's the main one. With respect to the kinds of public records that you all would handle from day to day, almost none of them would be exempt. I'm struggling to think of an example to give, and I'm not finding one. So
Personnel matters also would be exempted, wouldn't they?
So personnel matters.
Disciplinary actions, reviews.
So those documents, those materials are exempted for a certain period of time, but only during the pendency of an internal HR investigation. Once the investigation is concluded, all disciplinary items are open for public inspection. So. Voting conflicts. This one's fun. Again, if you think you have a voting conflict, I bet you don't, but you should call me before the meeting. It's very easy to discuss the multi-factor analysis that we're about to review when it's over the phone, there's no meeting that's about to start in 5 minutes, right? There's no 10 other questions being asked of either of us. Give our firm a call. We are available to you. We are a resource for you. So use us. Voting conflicts are codified in Section 112 Florida statutes. And this provision of Florida statutes applies to public officers. And if you are a member of a collegial body, which you are, it applies to you. So, what is a voting conflict? Local elected or appointed officers such as yourselves may not vote on any measure which would inure to your special private gain or loss, or any measure which you know would inure to the special private gain or loss of a principal by which you're retained or employed, a parent organization or subsidiary of a corporate principal by whom you are retained, a relative, or a business associate. Now again, this is a lot, right? So let's talk about it. First, I'm going to talk about, so who's a principal, right? We're talking here about, the first bullet point is to your own private gain or loss, so that should be pretty straightforward. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The second bullet, right, we're required to kind of do an analysis of folks who are in business entities that are related to us. So who is a principal? We're going to talk about a few of these. Principal would be an employer. If you're a professional, it would be a client of an attorney or an accountant or insurance broker or some other professional practice. Or a corporation for which you serve as a compensated director. Who's a relative? Let's go back. All right, so we got principal out of the way. The parent organization one's pretty niche, I have to say, so don't really have to worry about that. A relative. Who is a relative? Father, mother, son, daughter, husband, wife, brother, sister, father-in-law, mother-in-law, I can go on. It's not as wide-ranging as the anti-nepotism and gift laws, but who is a relative is defined pretty broadly, so we have to keep an eye on that. A business associate. if this applies to you, that is a person or entity who's carrying on a business enterprise with a public officer, regardless of the form of business. And the two things you have to think about is there a common commercial pursuit ongoing? And the second is much easier. Is there a current ongoing business relationship? Again, we're going to get into more of the nitty-gritty on the requirements here. It doesn't apply to all situations where you might have some speculative gain or loss, right? It has to be special. And the gain or loss has to be economic. All right? So what should be considered? When we're looking about, when you call me and say, hey, Garrett, I think I have a voting conflict, and you lay out the facts for me, this is the analysis that we go through, right? We look at what the size of the affected class is. We see whether the relative benefit or harm, again, economic benefit or harm, when compared to other members of the affected class. Is the loss remote? Is it speculative? And again, in bullet 4 here, this does not apply to procedural or preliminary votes. So we just voted to approve the minutes just now. What if there was an item in the minutes, confirming that we voted to approve some rezone, and one of you, that was a property that one of your brothers owned? Would you be allowed to vote to approve the minutes? Yes. It's not a voting conflict to merely affirm something that has already been done or take some other procedural or preliminary matter. The same would be said if on a particular agenda there's an item where you've identified a conflict, you called me beforehand, you already know you can't be up on the dais during that time. Can you vote to approve the agenda as written? Sure can. Again, whether or not the gain or loss is special will depend on the size of affected persons. So if we have a legislative item up for the board, a big comprehensive plan amendment that's going to apply to virtually everybody in Cocoa Beach, your class is really big, which means the chance of a special gain is really small, okay? So this is just, again, another part of the analysis that we're going to go through when you guys call me before the meeting to talk about any voting conflicts. Again, whether or not the gain is speculative, with this board, if you're affected personally, it's going to be pretty obvious to you. If maybe a relative of yours is going to benefit or have some loss depending on a vote, here it's really the quasi-judicial matters that are going to be affected, and we'll talk in a little bit about your way out of that. But again, if the loss or gain is remote or speculative, it's not going to be an issue. All right, so you have a voting conflict. What happens now? You must abstain from voting. You cannot vote on the item. You have to disclose the conflict orally prior to the vote, and you have to file a special form within 15 days, which our clerk of the board will read back at the next preceding meeting. All right? This rule is different for you all than it is for our city commission. Our city commissioner, let's just pick on the Brevard County commissioners. Brevard County commissioner could have a conflict with a particular item, can praise the applicant before the board, oh, this is the best project ever, we really ought to pass this. And then right before the vote could say, by the way, my brother owns that company. And then abstain from voting. With you all, it's a little different. With appointed boards, it's a little different. You guys have to disclose the conflict prior to even having the hearing on the matter. And then you have to remove yourself from the process.
What happens if there's a couple people with conflicts that would make it impossible to have a quorum?
It's a good question. That would be a very unique circumstance, I think. The way that we look, at the law, at this kind of multi-factor item. I mean, you guys are a very diverse group of folks, and it'd be hard to come up with a particular, unless you all are, retained by the same employer, that would really be where it's hard in kind of towns that, the town is company towns or what have you. That would be an issue, but, in that circumstance, you rotate in your alternates until you have a quorum, and if you don't have a quorum, then I don't think that's ever happened. So I don't know what would happen. But it'd be very difficult, particularly when you go through this analysis here, right? Because if if the size of the effective class is large enough that it potentially touches all of you, then that class is so large, it wouldn't necessarily be that the special gain or loss is so particularized that it would take you out of voting. So I think that's the answer. But I'm unaware of that ever happening. So I don't know, to answer your question. Any other questions real quick? All right. Well, you guys got through the really boring sunshine law and voting conflicts and public records section of tonight. A few takeaways I hope, you keep in your head that this is not to, this isn't for college credit, right? I'm gonna send you this slideshow. I'm gonna send it to our planning folks so they can shoot it out to you guys. You guys should not feel like experts in this area, but you should be able to identify issues as they come up, right? If someone comes up to you, talk to you about something that's coming before the board, if you don't know whether or not an email is a public record, a text message is a public record, whether the notes you take at a meeting are a public record. We can talk about that really briefly. Just exercise caution, and particularly with the sunshine law and the voting conflict issue, our office is a resource for you guys. You guys can call us whenever. And yeah, we like to knock problems out before they become problems. So with that, that is half of my droning on tonight. We have one more little, if I can pull it up. Here we go. All right. So no questions on sunshine law yet? I'm sure you have questions, but we can talk after the meeting.
It's pretty simple.
Pretty simple, all right. I agree with you, but it can be confusing sometimes. So the second part of my presentation tonight, we're very briefly going to go over parliamentary procedures, which you guys know really well. So we're going to fly through that. And then we're going to talk about quasi-judicial hearings. We're going to talk about due process issues and those pesky ex parte communications. So as you all know, we use procedure here to keep order. Here are some fundamental goals. Procedures meant to protect the rights of the minority, maintain the rule of the majority, and promote efficient proceedings. We like efficiency. We like quick meetings. Every single meeting will have an agenda that sets forth the order in which business is going to be conducted. If you think something ought to go out of order, obviously at the beginning of the hearing, you guys can make a motion to amend the agenda. What can you talk about at a meeting? You should really focus your efforts at every meeting on items that are noticed on the agenda, particularly items where you're going to take official action. Now, at the end of the meeting where you guys have board discussion time and you guys want updates on projects, you guys maybe want staff to come back to you with some additional information at the next meeting, that's totally fine. You guys can give direction to staff whether it is an item that's noticed on the agenda or not. Generally, we like to stick to what is on the agenda. Let's see. As you guys know, not every item needs to be voted on, roll call, your individual board comments. Some items do require action, and that, as you guys are really good at, you make by motion. Particularly when we get into the quasi-judicial items. As you guys know, we utilize a script for our quasi-judicial proceedings, so it makes it really easy to follow the procedure there. But generally, we'll have staff present an item, we'll have questions from the board, and then we'll have our applicant speak, questions by the board, public comment, closed public comment, board comment, right? Same thing with voting, as you guys know. You can take roll call vote, you can do, go down the roll call vote, right? So, number of ways to vote. Generally, roll call vote is favored in quasi-judicial proceedings, or just the all in favor is easy for the preliminary items that are on our agenda every day. You can amend a motion. I'm sure you guys know that. If you make a motion and there's discussion on the motion, it's generally best practice to have the individual who made the motion make the amendment to the motion. Right? And then if the amendment fails, a vote is taken on the original motion. This is all pretty easy stuff. You guys obviously are free to ask questions whenever. Questions are fantastic. It cuts through a lot of the confusion that sometimes happens when you're in a position where you don't know, do we vote, do we not vote, is the amended motion on the table, what's going on? Feel free to ask for clarification. And please do it before the vote. Cannot stress that enough. Motions for reconsideration are permitted, but you should not have to do that, right? We should have all of our discussion fleshed out before the vote is taken, but if we need a motion for reconsideration, a member of the board who voted on the affirmative side of the motion or the negative side of the motion, depending on what wins, can ask that the board reconsider the subject matter. You have a vote on the motion for reconsideration. If that is approved, you start the process of the item all over again. So that is something that is available to you all in the context of a quasi-judicial decision, so something like a rezoning or a site plan approval. You should not do this, right? You should flesh everything out before the vote. Again, just went over that. If at any point in time you guys are reviewing a pretty large project, or maybe there's a lot of confusion with certain parts of an application, it is within the authority of the board to not vote on an item on a particular night and postpone a continuation of that item until the next meeting, right? So that is all okay, and it comports with due process requirements for quasi-judicial matters like resets. Any questions?
Are those new? Or are those two things that you just covered new, fairly new? Or have they been around for a while? The motion to reconsider and the...
Postpone to a time certain? Yeah, those are available to you. Sometimes it comes that you just frankly do not have enough information in front of, I'll talk about the time certain first. Sometimes you do not have the information that you need in front of you, but you don't necessarily want to render a vote either way, right? Maybe the missing thing is what's going to sway you, what's going to sway the board. It's appropriate in those instances to allow the applicant to come back or allow staff to come back at the next meeting, present what you guys need to see, and then continue on from there. Generally, what I will do, if that ever happens, is I will make sure the city consents to that, and I'll make sure the other party consents to that, because consent is the easiest way to get out of an appeal. If they say, yep, that sounds good, see you at the next meeting, then there are no issues. But again, there are tons of cases that talk about this in the quasi-judicial context. It's okay as long as we're not trying to frustrate something they're trying to do. And it almost never is. And then as to the motion to reconsider, I mean, you guys are, I've been to a couple of your board meetings. You guys are a really, really good board. All your discussions are really tight, and you guys get to the issues quickly. So I don't see this ever becoming something you guys utilize, but it is there. And And again, really, we'll go over this in a second. Your job is to flesh out everything during board discussion time. And then, someone moves to do something, and that's what happens. But this is always available to you guys. All right, this is the fun part of tonight. I saved the best for last. We're going to talk about quasi-judicial hearings, right? So you guys know there are times where this board acts in a quasi-judicial manner, right? Every item that comes before you, other than administrative items like approving the agenda, approving the minutes, all the boring stuff, those items are either legislative or quasi-judicial. And if an item is quasi-judicial, the chair and I have a very fun script that we read that will remind you of that. So what is a quasi-judicial proceeding? So quasi-judicial decisions are inquiries that investigate, declare, and enforce rights or liabilities based on specific facts and existing laws, right? So generally, with these types of items, we ask questions like, did a party do something to violate the law? That's more on the code enforcement side, right? We deal a lot with the second bullet. Does the law authorize a party to do what it requests? Does the applicant meet the requirements for a rezone? Have they submitted all of their application documents? Have they adequately addressed all of the criteria in the code, right? That's why we look at that staff's packet every time before we come to the meeting to answer those questions. Again, quasi-judicial matters, variances, rezones, site plan approvals, special exceptions, conditional uses, development approvals. You guys don't handle all of those, but those are just some examples. Legislative matters, amendments to the comprehensive plan, amendments to the land development code, amendments to the future land use map, right? A lot of times when we have petitions that come in, the future land use amendment change, right? That is a legislative decision, okay? You are making a legislative change to the map. You are putting a new requirement in place in the future for that particular property. And then the next item is usually the rezone, right? And that is quasi-judicial. If you ever have a question about what's what during a meeting, just ask me. Or ask staff, they know too. Like I said, we will always use a script here to kind of signal to folks on the board, but more importantly, folks in the audience when an item is legislative or quasi-judicial. And all the witnesses are going to have to be sworn into by the clerk. All right, so let's get into the fun stuff now. So really the biggest issue and where most items go on appeal from you all is because of a due process violation. So what's procedural due process? Anyone want to help me out? I'll give you a hint. It's at the bottom of the page. We have to give notice, right? If someone's going to have their application for a rezoning heard by the board, they need to know when that's going to be heard, right? They have to have adequate time to prepare their presentation. They have to know when their deadline is to have materials submitted to staff so staff can make their recommendation, right? We have to give adequate notice. And the second point, and this is by far the biggest one, is that folks have an opportunity to be heard, right? They get to present evidence. They get to cross-examine city staff. They get to bring witnesses. They get to question the city's witnesses and staff. And they, importantly, and this is important at the end when we talk about ex parte communications, they get to be informed on all the facts upon which you all act. All right, let's talk about evidence. And just for a moment, generally, a lot of the items that come before you all are not very contentious. A lot of them are recommended by staff. You get a nice presentation by the applicant, right? But in those instances where folks bring attorneys and make everything hard and they want to cross-examine folks, that is all within their right. And if that ever happens, it is built into our script to allow for that. So, all right, let's talk about evidence. So this is a judicial kind of thing that y'all do when you have quasi-judicial items before you. Does that mean that we follow a strict code of evidence? How many of you guys think, yeah, we follow a strict code of evidence? How many think, no, we don't? All the no's are right. We do not follow a strict code of evidence. There's some very basic minimum requirements that we have to follow, but generally the rule, and this is important, is that your decisions must be based on relevant, competent, substantial evidence in the record before the board. All right, what does that mean? In that bullet point, there's a really fancy kind of word salad definition of what competent, substantial evidence means. Don't worry about that. What you have to worry about, the question you have to ask yourself is right there at the bottom. Is your decision to vote yes or vote no, is it supported by relevant evidence, right? And by relevant, competent, substantial evidence, that's going to be testimony provided before the board. It's going to be documentary evidence provided before the board. And it's going to, again, this kind of didn't need to be in there, but it has to be relevant. It has to be about the decision before the board. Again, documentary evidence, maps, diagrams, reports, those fancy site plans you guys get to look at. Testimony from witnesses, including experts, when folks have their engineer come and talk to you all about how they meet the requirements of some code provision. I mean, that is all evidence that you guys can use to make your decision. The recommendation and testimony of a city's professional staff, and courts have generally recognized those folks as experts, right? Don't need to have them give their CV every time they get up in front of you. We can rely on what they're saying generally. Written report of staff, right? So when you get your agenda packet for the meeting, you should read it. You should definitely read it because everything in that packet is going to be competent, substantial evidence that you can base your decision off of. And then hearsay. Hearsay is fine. As you guys notice, no one ever says, I object, that's hearsay, chair rule on it. Hearsay is fine as long as it's not the only evidence to support your decision. So any questions yet? One thing to think about, something you may be thinking about but not asking me, is, Garrett, what happens if 95% of the evidence tends one way, but I want to vote the 5% way? Only 5% of the competent substantial evidence, says no, and I want to vote no. I want to make a motion to deny. Can I do that? What do you guys think?
Yes.
Yes? Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Because based on what you feel the evidence presents, you have to make your decision. When you say witnesses, and again, I think this happens more in a commission meeting than in one of our meetings, a witness is someone who gets up and speaks about the issue that's at hand. They're not necessarily in their 20-minute speech stating facts. They're also stating opinions, and you have to be able to separate all that, what is it, the wheat from the chaff?
That's exactly right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and then you'll also see that the rule is not, you have to make your decision based on what the majority of the relevant competent substantial evidence of the record is. You just have to have something in the record to base your decision on, right? So it can be the one kernel that allows you to make a motion to do what you want, but again, that's the requirement. It doesn't have to be the majority of the evidence, it just has to be relevant, competent, and substantial. But you bring up a great point about witnesses. We're going to talk about it, and actually right now, so I will just talk about it. Members of the public, how do we treat testimony of those who come up and give their 3 minutes to you guys? As a general rule, if they have some sort of unsubstantiated opinion, or they start talking about traffic impacts, or hey, they're not going to meet the technical requirements of what the city wants for this site plan, that's not going to be competent substantial evidence. Generally, that's what a lot of folks are very interested in. That's what like to come up here and talk to you all about. And that's perfectly fine. It's their right to do that. But that is not something that you all can consider in making your final decision. Except in 2 limited cases, and this is really important. A lot of decisions are appealed on this basis right here. The first is that if a member of the public is presenting actual and specific facts that are relevant to the decision, rather than just pure conjecture or opinion, those statements can be construed as competent substantial evidence. And we'll talk about that a little more in a second. The second exception is if the testimony relates to subjective matters that don't require expertise, right? So think about a development's impact on an area's natural beauty, right? Testimony might be competent substantial evidence if it's relevant to the legal inquiry. So think about this. If one of the requirements for the city in deciding whether or not to approve an application to rezone a piece of property, the applicant has to establish that their proposed use is harmonious with surrounding uses, then I think, that brings in subjective opinions of folks who might oppose a particular development. That's a very, very fine line, and almost always there's going to be some testimony in there that is conjecture. So it's not always best to rely on that, but that is something that you all can consider in making your decision. So these proceedings are not popularity contests, you guys know that. You can't base your decision on the number of people at a meeting or how important the folks who sent emails are. It has to be based on the relevant, competent, substantial evidence before y'all. And as you so pointedly put earlier, your real job is to assign weight to what comes before you. So a lot of the pretty much everything staff has to say, everything the applicant has to say is going to qualify as relevant, right? Competent, substantial evidence. So your job is to assign weight to what you think ought to win out in the end, right? You can ask questions of the parties. You can ask questions of your fellow board members. You can ask to review any evidence submitted by the parties. I know earlier we talked about procedure, but at the end of the day, at the very end, where we close public comment, it's back up here, board, let's talk about this. You guys can ask questions of staff, the applicant, yourselves. It's all fair game. It's all about weighing the evidence. All right, we're going to finish up with ex parte communications. Does anyone want to give me a definition of ex parte communications?
Discussion in a supermarket, things like that. If you run into a board member, yeah.
I like discussions between others in the supermarket, but we're not going to talk to each other because that's a sunshine law violation if it's about board business. What else? So we have a discussion between who?
The applicant calls you and talks to you about the project.
Very good. Or what about if you call staff to ask about a particular item?
That should be okay. If you're asking for clarification.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So ex parte communications, this is the general rule. Communications between a decision maker and another party without the presence or the permission of all other parties to the proceeding. All right? So if you guys call planning staff about a particular quasi-judicial proceeding, and you ask specific questions about items in the packet, that is an ex parte communication because it is a communication with another party to the decision, right? The city is always a party to these items. And those have to be, as we'll find out in a moment, disclosed. So what we recommend is that if you're going to have a discussion with planning staff prior to a meeting on a particular item, that you just keep it in the back of your head to disclose at the beginning of the meeting. Another thing you could do, you can ask general questions that aren't specific to one item. But yeah, it's,
Let's use the example that a petitioner presents a package, a development package, and in that package is a landscape plan. And I'm not sure I'm reading that landscape plan correctly, and when I'm trying to evaluate whether this plan has merit, I don't have a right to call the planner and say, I don't think I'm reading this right. Is this really palm trees or is it rose bushes? Tell me what I'm doing wrong here.
so two things. So if those are the types of conversations that really you need before the meeting, you can absolutely have them. But that is, again, that is an ex parte communication that's going to have to be disclosed before the item. The second thing I would tell you is generally those sorts of questions would be just directed to the applicant at the meeting. You know, hey, I'm looking at the site plan, you know, can you tell me more about this? Can you tell me more about that? You know, generally that's the best practice, I would say. But as we're going to learn, although the Florida legislature has deemed ex parte communications presumptively prejudicial, there are ways to take the prejudicialness out of it. So we're going to talk about disclosures now. So what happens if they occur? What happens is you say, if there's some item that you need to just raise with staff, or maybe you go to make a site visit to a particular piece of property, and oh, the developer's there, right? And the developer starts chatting you up. How do we go about disclosing these communications? If they can't be avoided, you need to disclose them before the item comes up. And we're going to talk about the amount of detail that we need to provide to remove the presumption of prejudice. And the quick rule is you want to touch on the identity. You want to give a summary of the subject. You want to do it, again, prior to the start of the agenda item, and our clerk is going to record that and make it a part of the record. A few things to think about here. It can be as simple as, you know, I called Tanja before the meeting, and I just had to know about these trees on this, you know, on this plan, and she filled me in on what they were, and you know, that's it. And the whole reason why you have this process of disclosing it before the agenda item is that the applicant is there. The applicant can hear what was discussed, and then they can probe further if they want to. You know, oh, what did Tanja really say about those dots? Because we know what they are. We can tell you what they are, but what did she say, right? Generally, that's not going to be the case, but it's an opportunity for the parties that were excluded from the communication to probe and ask questions about what was discussed. And again, if we go way, way back, right, that very last point there, right, an opportunity to be heard, right, they have a right to be informed of all facts upon which the board acts. That's an unintentional right, but it is the case that if you have a conversation with a party to a quasi-judicial proceeding outside of the actual hearing, that is a due process violation if it is not disclosed.
And you have to, if you did a site visit, you have to disclose that
So, not necessarily.
on your own.
A lot of folks like to say that they did a site visit, I've noticed, which is fine. I don't mind that at all. But a site visit is not a communication between a board member and a developer, or a board member and a property owner, right? You all live here. You guys have background information. You guys drive past sites all the time. You know, all of that, you know, just driving past the site, taking a look around. That's, again, doesn't need to be disclosed. If you guys want to keep letting us know that you went by it, then that's great, but it's not required, per se. But if you want to do it, just stay on the safe side, then that's absolutely something that you can do. So again, we're going to make sure we identify the person or the group that we talked with. We're going to give a summary of the subject. We don't need a dissertation, just a quick, hey, this is what we talked about. Again, needs to be prior to the hearing, and it's going to be becomes part of the record. That was a lot. We went through it really quickly. There were a lot of fine points I didn't touch on because of our time here, but any questions? Any thoughts? Nothing? That's it for me.
Ms. McKinney has some questions.
Oh, yes.
I just, you were talking about that story, like, what did they write? The whole time, I want to know what was on that note.
Oh, it was just something, I think, very disparaging about the person who came up to comment.
Okay.
But it was in relation to the public comments they made, so.
You said embarrassing, so I was ready for the.
Yeah, it was really bad. But that's, that's a good point to end on. Again, there's the public record side of things, there's no exception for, man, I really don't want this to get out. Nope. Again, another thing, just while I'm thinking about it, notes. A lot of questions come up about notes. Hey, when I was reviewing the agenda packet, I took a couple notes on page 6 to remind me to ask the applicant this question. I wanted to know about the trees. I wrote down a little note. Is that a public record? The answer is it depends. Depends whether or not you showed that particular item to the folks to the left and right of you, right? Because remember, it's all about documents that are made or received in connection with public business. It's kind of the general way to think about it, that are used to communicate, perpetuate, or formalize knowledge, right? There's nothing formalizing about writing a quick note to jot down, right, to remind yourself. You're not perpetuating any information, right? The only thing that could come up is, are you communicating information to someone else? So if you take down a little note at the meeting and you keep it to yourself and it's just to jog your memory, it's not a public record. But the second you go, hey, should I ask that question? It's a public record. So keep that in mind. I don't want to tell you all this and now you're afraid to write emails or afraid to call staff or you're afraid to take down notes. You guys as a board, I've been to a couple of your meetings, you guys are really, really good. So there shouldn't be any issues, and if you guys ever do have questions, you guys all have my card with my cell number if you need to reach me in a pinch, and a lot of times we can work through these issues really quickly. So if there's no more questions, we can move on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I did notice that we skipped over the standard operating procedures. Are you going to go through those?
What was that?
The standard operating procedures?
Oh, yes. Basically, we handed out that, were you planning to go over that part? Standard operating procedures, or we just hand those out?
Each of them has a copy of it.
Yeah, so we gave out a copy of the standard operating procedures for you guys.
Part of the package, isn't it?
And then, I just wanted to go over a quick piece that I thought was important for staff to help orientate the board to what we do. I think of us, staff, you, and the building department, our planning department. I think of us kind of like a three-legged stool. And so we're a team. We're working together to make sure that the city is built the way that the community has decided through our comprehensive plan. And so as we go through our processes throughout the year, working on our development plans or building plans, we work together to make sure that that vision comes to fruition within the city of Cocoa Beach. And so, under section 4.03, Planning Board. The Planning Board was established by the City Commission with 5 members and 2 alternates, non-voting members. And then there's 4 tasks, or A, B, C, and D here, that is in our code. And it says basically the Planning Board serves as the city's comprehensive planning agency. So we're all a part of that comprehensive planning agency that the city uses to represent us even on the state level. So through that, B is to review permits, land development plans with the city to assure that they conform with the city's building and zoning ordinances as well as our comprehensive plan. So it's important that we work together looking at that comprehensive plan whenever we're looking at a permit or a site permit or something that we're doing there to see, is this in line with our comprehensive plan? And then C is we monitor the city's growth and the adequacy and effectiveness of our zoning regulations. So a lot of times we bring code amendments, text rewrites, things of that nature before the planning board for you guys to review, look at it and compare it with our comprehensive plan and make sure that what we're talking about rewriting is actually going to fit within the city's scope and plan for the future. Then D is you oversee the periodic evaluation and amendment of the city's comprehensive plan as required by state law. And that is Lauren is gonna have a plan for you today, a presentation I meant to say, to go over that. So just letting you know what the planning board does, and I know I've been over this part before, but I know you weren't here, so comprehensive plan, again, in the planning board, the staff, city staff, we review the comprehensive plan on a periodic basis, make sure that we're meeting all the state standards as well as that our plan is up to date, it's representing our city. Usually the comprehensive plan runs for at least a 20-year period. So when we start to review that plan, we're looking at a 20-year outlook of what we want our city to look like. And in that, we look at the future land use maps and things of that nature and make sure that everything is working together as planned. And then the second side of that is our land development code regulations. So everything that we have in our comprehensive plan, we create the land development code inconsistent with that plan. So it's more of the how do we reach this plan step by step. So that's what our land development code does. And in that code, we have our zoning, our permit review rules and regulations, how do we look at site development, as well as plat review. So through that land development code, we've spelled out everything we want to look at and make sure that we're reviewing through that site plan and any type of development that goes on in the city. And that's what the planning staff does on a daily basis. The building permitting side is once the planning staff says, yes, this is in the right zoning, it can go here, they're meeting all their setbacks and they're meeting all the site plan requirements, then the building department gets a chance to look at it and see, will this building fit the Florida Building Code? Are they going to meet all the ADA requirements and things of that nature? Is there going to be a problem with traffic or parking or any of those things? So as we go, and then these are all the departments within the city that looks at our plan. So we have the planning department, building, fire, engineering, stormwater, utilities. We don't want to put a building on top of a major utility line, you know. So things of that nature have to all be reviewed before we bring it before you guys and let you know that this is something that we're considering through our staff, and now you guys have the opportunity to make sure it fits within the city overall plan. And then you make a recommendation to the city commission to either approve it or deny it, and then they make the final decision. After that, the building department, once the project starts, they'll do all of the inspections and again, make sure that what we agreed on here, the developer and the contractor follow that plan. That's it for me. And now I'm going to introduce.
What's the density cutoff between what the staff handles on their own or goes to the planning board? Is it 30 units?
Yeah, 30,000 square feet or 3 acres is when it comes before the planning board. But we do this for on every project, even if it's a fence or a driveway. We look at everything on every project, but once it gets to that certain level, then it comes before you guys and then also goes to the city commission. And a lot of times we bring to you, like I said, code amendments, text amendments. Sometimes we wanted you to hear things that you may not actually be voting on, but we think it's important for our planning board to get an understanding of it, an opportunity to see it before we take it before commission or before it's approved through the city. Any questions? And also you guys can have the opportunity to ask us to review things too. It's not always that we have to, you know, recommend things, but if it's something that you guys think is important for us to review as a city, you should be bringing that to us, and we can prepare that project and bring it before the board as well and get the community involved. All right?
And now
Also-
Lauren, our principal planner.
And so Lauren is going to talk about the comprehensive plan.
So what Tanja talked to you about, you know, she got into a lot about the plan, which I think all of you probably participated or been on the board and done recent minor updates. I think the last one you worked on as a planning commission was probably in 2021. They got approved in early part of 2022. From minor updates, so when law changes come about and things that cause us to have to keep our comprehensive plan concurrent with state laws and other changes, you sometimes have to do a minor update. The planning system, basically, when you're looking at the plans, go from kind of a conceptual basis to more specific planning. So as you know, a little outline of the comp plan contains your the community's vision, and that gets community vision then is broken down into goals, objectives, and sometimes tasks. And those goals and policies then get melded into what's called our development regulations. And so comp plan feeds into several different types of regulations, not just zoning and housing. And those are implemented through permitting. So comprehensive plan is kind of a pretty broad encompassing document that talks about future land use, which is your land use map or your zoning map, future land uses, housing, conservation, intergovernmental coordination. It gets into utilities. A recent one that you did an update on was property rights, coastal management, recreation, open space, capital improvements, and transportation mobility. These are required elements of the comp plan here in the state of Florida. Each of those items, or each of those elements of the comprehensive plan is then intercoordinated to be consistent with flood, transportation, let's see, what else do I got up there? Florida water plan. So, you know, there's federal laws, state laws, and other things that get melded into those ultimate regulations that get approved, that you help develop and get approved in the community. So the whole process, basically, the comprehensive plan is a compilation of mandatory elements, each having its own policy statements, goals, and objectives tied to standards and maps. As a coordinated system of elements, the comp plan provides for the physical, social, and economic development, both private and public, as a complex system of checks and balances. They help our city meet the needs of the present without compromising future generations' ability to meet their own needs. State law also provides for optional elements that a community can have. And this is a list of some of those elements that are recognized. Some of those we may look at as things change, as the public's vision and needs change, as communities grow. Sometimes these other elements then, like redevelopment is one that the city here has addressed. I think in 2012 and 14, when you had developed the core redevelopment zones in the city, you addressed some of those things. General planning systems, this is important, has a very important element to it of concurrency, consistency. It says comprehensive plans shall have the legal status set out in the Community Planning Act, and no public or private development shall be permitted except in conformity with the comprehensive plan. So it's a pretty important document. Land development regulations must be consistent with the comp plan. And then here's a little tidbit. It says, in Pinecrest Lakes versus, is that Shadell? The appellate court ruled that the trial judge could order a complete demolition and removal of 5 multi-story apartment buildings because the development was inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. So it's pretty important that we get our reviews and our analysis that we've been discussing kind of as accurate and correct as we can. And it's important that the public doesn't jump the gun with their projects either. Comprehensive plan project overview, where are we now? So based on my little bit of review that I've been able to do, in 2000, the city adopted its 2010 comprehensive plan. That was kind of a major change in the plan at that time. Primary focus was low-density residential, family-oriented, resort-type community. That was kind of the vision and the goals. In 2012, the downtown design standard was developed. Primary focus was recognizing and promoting various downtown districts, architecture, and outdoor spaces and amenities into a collective design standard vision for each district. In 2014, the Gateways Master Plan was developed. Primary focus to expand downtown vision to include primary tourism areas. And then what we have in front to work with right now is a 2015 comprehensive plan that had a planning horizon to 2025. Well, we're almost there. So recent updates in 2022 addressed consistency with state codes but did not amend the planning horizon. So that's what I want to kind of point out there. Our planning horizon is getting rather short. State law requires the city to amend our 2025 comprehensive plan to reflect new statutorily required planning periods pursuant to state law. Not going to repeat those here, but basically what it says, local government comprehensive plans are now required to include 2 planning periods. One covering at least a 10-year period occurring after the plan is adopted. So that's kind of what the city has done in the recent past is kind of 7-year extensions, or 10-year extensions, excuse me. And now it says they want one covering a 20-year period. Florida Commerce wants to see that all comprehensive plans and data analysis have been updated to reflect the new planning horizons in our comprehensive plan. So the state's kind of wanting us to do this. Comprehensive plan, the role of planning agencies, okay, state code, local planning agencies shall prepare a comprehensive plan or plan amendment after hearings to be held after public notice. So we heard about those things today. And shall make recommendations to the governing body regarding the adoption or amendment of the plan. And then city code, which Tanja just went over a little bit. The city commission shall establish an independent planning board of not less than 5 members to serve as the city's comprehensive planning agency to monitor the growth, the adequacy and effectiveness of our zoning regulations. and to oversee the periodic evaluation and amendment of the city's comprehensive plan as required by law. Where do we go from, or where do we want to be? Well, we'd like to be prior to the end of our comprehensive plan in 2025, we'd like to work and develop a public participation plan, perform the required review and evaluations of each of those required 13, I think there was 13 elements there, and confirm that the vision, goals, and objectives continue to meet the needs of the community and into the future. And we would like to have a planning horizon that we extend out there to 2035 or 2050 and beyond. So I'd like to get it, instead of 20 years, go to 2050 from a staff standpoint. How do we get going? Well, as a planning board, you can help by helping staff establish a series of public workshops scheduled as a starting point to formulate the update project work plan. As individuals, of course, we can document areas of the current plan that you may not understand or that you may not make sense to you, et cetera. Ask questions, point those things out to us as we go through the process. Listen to, encourage public participation, and encourage the public and others to get involved. So basically what we were thinking from a staff standpoint is asking the commission to commit to or decide how to proceed. We'd like to start setting a schedule to hold public workshops. Maybe the first hour or so of your regular meetings, and then have business scheduled, like hearings and other things, schedule those to start like at 6:30 and have the first hour or so of the meeting set to where we can work on comprehensive plan updates and do more presentations. And, there's a lot of work to get this started, but as we compile it and work with you to come up with a work plan, maybe we could start that at the first part of your next meeting starting in 24. So.
I know it'd be very helpful to me, and I'm not sure of my colleagues here, to get a copy of the 2012 Downtown Design Standards and the 2014 Gateways Master Plan, because I've never seen those, and I'd like to get a copy of those.
I was able to find those online here, let you glance at them, but I think we can make these available. They're pretty big documents,
Yeah.
so.
We'll send them out or put them on a drive for you guys to review them as well. Again, we have about less than 2 years to do this plan, and normally it takes about 18 months, so we really need to get started pretty quickly here. So we're looking at getting going the first meeting in January, and then moving on, each meeting having a work session where we can start the plan. How are we going to get the community involved with the comprehensive planning process?
I mean, perhaps staff could go through these and separate out anything that's really not germane to what we're doing, because I'm just seeing a couple of pages.
There's a lot of beautiful things in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of very pretty pictures, but
Some of the
get to the
question
meat of
when
it.
you're looking at them
Meat of it,
is,
yeah.
we need to.
that'd be
evaluate-
very helpful, because obviously we don't want to start working and have kind of embarrassing to have a public meetings and not understand and that we may be in conflict of plans that already exist.
Yes.
Yeah, we can try and also make that available on the website for the public too.
First thing is definitely evaluating where we are, and then looking as to where we want to be. That's the basic
One
overall.
other observation, if I may. I think we need another box above the community vision. What do we want to be? And that box should be, what are we? Because if you talk to 10 different people, they'll tell you 10 different things. The biggest one being, oh, we're a surfing village. I don't think so.
Who are we? Yeah?
Yeah, I don't think we are anymore. So I think there needs to be a paragraph or something of what we are right now, how many parks we have, the golf courses we have, how many firemen, how many policemen. I mean, we're a city.
Yes.
Yeah.
And everybody's got to understand that. And I think we need to understand that in order to go forward.
Yes, we are definitely going to do all of the lifting in terms of putting together the data, preparing these meetings, getting the public involved. The main thing that we need is public participation, because that is the part that is going to make this plan work. Is we need as much public participation as we can get.
I have a question.
Yes.
So what are you asking for us to help lay out the plan, or are you going to come forward with something that says, you want to have a workshop on this section, and maybe the 10-year section and then the 20, or do you want to go, or section by section of the comprehensive plan and go through, or chunk it, what's the chunks of material, because there's so much.
So one of the things I thought was important for the city is to get a consultant involved, which, a team of people who have done these plans in other cities and are familiar with the process, because it's such an important document. We're talking about 20 years out. It's not, something that we want to take lightly. So that's one of the things the consultant is going to lay out for us. The main thing I'm asking you guys to do today is review the documents that we're giving out, so that, you're very knowledgeable about the plan, and then, be aware that over the next year, we will be having these workshops at the beginning of our meetings, every meeting. And then we may also need to have additional meetings if we're not meeting our goals as we have them laid out.
We'll be working on a long-term plan that some of it can be narrowed down, you know what I mean, to that 10-year. There may be aspects of it that are 10 years, but the goal is to stretch it out.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to see if we're going to have, I don't know, one every month or whatever. And to see, okay, over the next 12 months, we're going to talk these subjects, and here's,
Oh, yes.
All that. And to maybe make a point to invite or talk to people who are kind of our subject matter experts, like in the historical section, maybe the Historical Society, or if it's talking about the recreation, then you bring in the leisure and recreation people, or at least invite them.
Yes.
To get help from people who already are doing pieces
Absolutely.
of this.
We definitely want
to be
subject
in the meeting,
matter
in the discussion.
experts, but most importantly, we want the community, because we don't want anybody to
Right.
feel left out of this process. We don't want to, just go straight to the higher ups and say, hey, what do? We want to start with, everybody having a voice. So in that process, sometimes you may see me not say as much. It's because I'm leaving that space open for people to speak. If I'm, start to outline this whole thing, then it can get to the point where, hey, she's got this already laid out for us. I don't want to do that. I want it to come specifically from the community. So although I'm asking you guys to think about those things and write those things down, be prepared to come to the workshops to work on those type of ideas. Again, I'm trying to leave it as open as possible so we can have a really good experience in this process.
Yeah, I agree that it's most important to get the community vision, which is like your first
Yes.
box,
Yes.
But you also need structured something to
Yes,
pull it out of people, or what you're trying to, really get from them. And
Yes.
sometimes it helps to have people who are familiar with what's been going on. And I don't know how they did it for the first or the last update of the comprehensive plan. but
I
there
do
may be
know
some
that they've
information
hired
there.
people to do it in the past, write most of it in the past. Again, for me, my goal is to make sure that the community is on the forefront and not, at the end. So although I'm going to make sure we have structure, I want to start with the community's vision and voice and hear from them as quickly as possible in this process. So maybe at our next meeting, we'll start to work through, what our meetings will be set up as in terms of the different areas that we need to evaluate, but then also start to work through how do we get people involved with each one of those sections that we need to evaluate and put together.
So how do you want you want us to just think about it and bring it to the next meeting, or give you something before then, or what do you
I think
think?
it'd be good if you guys want to set up your meeting starting for next year so that so that we can schedule workshops on those meeting dates, then we can start flushing out the type of stuff that you're talking at those meetings.
Yeah.
I think it'd be good if you could bring a plan of how you're gonna do the plan
Okay.
at the first meeting.
We'll do that. We'll do that. That'll be the plan. Have a plan of how we're gonna do the plan at the first meeting.
We can bring an outline that you can.
An
pick
outline,
apart.
yeah.
Yeah, just the outline. I know, I didn't want to give too much today because we do have this consultant that I want to bring on board pretty quickly. And I want to get some guidance from expertise in that area. So I didn't want to, set up a certain expectation and then they come in and change that expectation. I think that would be kind of like setting them up to fail maybe.
So who's going to drive the meetings, with the public? Would it be the board here, or?
Yes, we will be the ones that are driving the meetings, handling the meetings. This expertise consultant will just guide us through making sure that we're not missing anything specific in our plan. Like, when we're doing our visioning, are we hitting all of the key visioning criteria that makes up a good plan? So, for example, are we doing paper surveys? Where does that fit in today's world? How are we going to do telephone surveys, mailers? It's going to be a lot of different factors that we need to sit down with this consultant and discuss as we kick this off.
It's not staff's plan. It'd be through the planning board and everybody as a team. But in the end, the planning board's the one that's got to make a recommendation on it.
So maybe since we would familiarize ourselves with the comprehensive plan, then maybe we would throw out some ideas and let the public weigh in and come up with their own thoughts.
Well, think about projects in town. How are they working? How are they not working? What's the public think about it? Those sorts of things, when you review the comp plan, that's what you want to be looking at. Is this working? Are we actually doing this? Are we able to do this?
Has the whole world changed since the 2010 plan was put into effect? And now a lot of those things are outdated, So what does it look like today, and what do we anticipate it to look like in the future as well? Because this plan has to carry us for quite a while.
Any other? Ms. McKinney?
Is there previous surveys that were used, and what was like the engagement on that
Previous surveys, meaning
for the community?
for 2010? We're going to be looking to see if we can find any of that data, but
There's
a
some
lot of,
bigger document.
yeah. And then that document, yes.
I'm just wondering how efficient or how well that worked previously.
Yeah, the public input has changed
Yes.
drastically over the last
Yeah.
13
Surveys are
years.
good, but
Yes.
they're sometimes hard to get.
They don't always ask the right questions that you
Yes.
want to answer.
And I think that's another reason why the consultant would be helpful, because they'll have a lot of their own tools, software packages, and things of that nature that we won't have in-house.
Everybody's got a smartphone these days, so.
Ms. Colorado?
The one thing it would be helpful to see, I don't know how hard this would be, maybe the consultant knows this, but to see which pieces of the comprehensive plan are really tied to state law, and you're really not going to change that unless you're going to try to go change state law. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Because some of that stuff, there's no use of tackling or having a lot of discussion about something that's set in the state laws.
Yes, we
I
would
don't know how much
definitely,
of that it is, but
I'm pretty sure
Yeah, there are certain elements of the comprehensive plan that are mandated by state law. But a lot of the future vision for, what the board is ultimately going to recommend to the commissioners, I mean, a lot of that is dependent on citizen input, right? Like if you guys want to see more park spaces, or beach access, things of that nature. I mean, those are some key things that you'd think Cocoa Beach would have kind of be at the forefront of. So that should be reflected in the comprehensive plan. And then moving forward, our staff touched on it. It's really dependent on, what's working now, and then what do we want to do later on. And a lot of the state requirements are really towards having a comprehensive plan, the particular elements that are in the comprehensive plan, and then, moving forward, ensuring that everything you do is consistent with the comprehensive plan. There are some more technical requirements, but I think kind of the big picture things that staff's presenting, that's up to you guys and citizens.
It's a big job.
It is a big job. And you guys are the winners of the lottery.
Have you already selected your consultant, have them on board?
I have a couple that I'm looking at now,
Okay.
that I know are very competent in doing it. I think it's mostly looking at budgeting at this point and, how do we get them on quickly?
So you're close?
Yes,
Okay.
because we definitely have to move forward pretty quickly with this project.
It might be a shorter topic in January's meeting, but
I'm hoping to bring them into the January meeting. If not, for sure, they will be here in February. Okay.
Any other questions for staff? All right, the last item under new business is 2024 meeting dates. Is that what we've already discussed, or?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We did have did you have that calendar in the handouts? We'll send out a calendar that
Still gonna
has,
be the first Monday?
the first Monday, but I didn't remember, that's why we had that note on there. Because the first of the year, New Year's Day is on Monday.
We don't want to celebrate New Year's Day.
So we definitely won't be here for that Monday. So we were looking at the 8th, and as long as nobody here has any conflicts with that, it will be on the 8th.
I will not be present.
You will not be here, okay. So we will have to have our alternate.
I'm school board, so I have no vote anyway.
School
so-
board, okay, all right, that's right, I forgot about that.
Okay,
All right then,
My boss can come.
all right.
all right,
That covers new business.
that covers new business. And then Devin, you have some reports? And I don't know if, did you guys introduce yourself? I'm sorry.
Public comment.
Comment?
Public
introduce
comments not
yourself
till later in the,
Do we have public comment on the new business?
Well, we still have the staff report.
yeah, we still got a staff report. We'll cover it in just a second.
Okay, so Devin Talley, Senior Planner. So for our staff reports tonight, we have the building permit activity report for Q3. That's from July to September of 2023. So with that, we have 677 records created, 1,274 inspections done, 178,929.65 of revenue collected, and 639 permits issued. And then we also have our vacation rental registration activity report for Q3, July to September of 2023, with 46 records created, 0 inspections done, $13,400 of revenue collected, and 0 permits issued at this time. And that concludes the staff reports, if there's any other questions.
How is the vacation rental audit going?
Tandra, if you could speak on that, the vacation rental audit.
So yeah, we have kicked off our vacation rental program pretty strenuously at this point, and we're bringing them into compliance currently. We have about 90 outstanding permits, vacation rentals that we've been able to identify that are not in compliance, but even within the last week, I think at least 10 of those came in to apply for their permit. And so we still have to do their review. We have a fire review and a building permitting review that has to be done before they can be approved. And that's in the single-family residential zoning district.
Do we have a completion time when they're looking to get the majority of that done, or?
I think within the next 6 months, we should have most of those into compliance. Again, it's a process of identifying them, sending out letters. Just to give you some insight, we send them out a letter, give them 30 days to come in and, a nice letter. Hello, we've identified you. So majority, all of those have gotten that letter. And then with that letter, we've received about 15 responses recently. And then after that, if they don't come into compliance, we send out the second letter is a code enforcement letter. So at that point, you have 14 days to comply before we start a full-blown code enforcement process. And then that eventually gets you to the magistrate. So although I would like it to go much faster, it's just that we have to follow these steps in order to document our case and go before the magistrate in an effective way that we can, charge the fees and fines is mostly what we have in our toolkit.
Okay. Ms. Snyder, you had-
Yeah, I noticed that we have 0 inspections. Is that because we don't have the manpower? We're still looking to hire somebody?
I'm not sure why that came out. 0 inspections on, what was that, for vacation rental?
Yeah, that was for the vacation rental registration
Yeah.
for Q3.
That is not accurate, because we are definitely having fire inspections consistently. It's just not showing up on that particular document.
So we are doing inspections.
Yes, we having fire inspections daily. We have 2 new inspectors that you guys approved. One is Javier, he's inspected on a daily basis, as well as our fire Sal, and he has another guy on his team, I think.
Okay.
I can't remember his name, but he's a part-time inspector as well, who's going out doing the fire inspections. Yes.
A lot of those are getting scrutinized through the site plan application process as well. So when they come through, we're looking at the ones that need to be looked at to make sure they meet the requirements for the vacation rental as well. So,
Yeah, because some people want to create a 4-suiter in their single-family home, and we have had to really, work with that type of customer to make sure that that's not happening as well.
Ms.
I was
McKinney
just,
first.
is there a place, either county or state, that you can go and see a business listed that's a Airbnb?
I'm sorry?
Is there like a record of like Airbnbs in your neighborhood? Like you can go to the state or county listing
or where the public can look at
where the
it.
public can verify that the people are in
You
fact.
can look on our site. We have all of our permit information there that you can search.
Okay,
So you can definitely see it on our site if there's an address that you're interested in, because it won't pull up like a map of them, but if you put in an address, it'll come up and show you whether it's been approved or
and if
not.
it's not there, what steps would be followed?
Reach out to us. We did start a new section of our web page is code enforcement related, and it has the vacation rentals on there, so anybody can go in there and notify us of a vacation rental within their area, and that notice will come directly to the vacation rental staff to review, and that's been working really well as well.
Ms. Bova?
Yeah, along with that, I think it would be a good idea to push that out in the emails that, go out. Because I know there's a lot of people that are not happy to know that they have vacation rentals in their neighborhoods and they don't know where to go. But if that was like added to the letters from the city, from the emails.
The CBNN?
Yeah, CBN.
Yeah. I thought she pushed that out a couple weeks ago. I'll check with Karen, she does that for us, and I'll make sure that she does it more frequently so that everybody will get a chance to see that email. Maybe, sending it once is not enough, so we'll try and do it at least once a month, just to, remind people that we have this option on our website that you can go in there and let us know if you see a vacation rental, because the software is not perfect. We found a few errors, just missed the address here or there, but it's actually pretty accurate overall.
Any other questions for staff? Mr. Olson, you have any reports?
No.
All right, that closes staff and city attorney reports. General public comment.
Chuck Broughton, 35 Westview Lane. I really like the idea of doing the comp plan overview and starting it off with the public comment, whatever, doing it at your planning board meetings, which is really a nice idea because maybe we could get more people out and get them more involved. But the workshops, when we do workshops, it seems like they're a little bit more free-for-all. Like at planning board, you get 3 minutes. But in a workshop, you got a lot more time to have somebody come up and say their comments and stuff. So I don't know, you don't want your planning meeting to go awry. You better, cut it to a certain time certain. And then maybe a workshop in addition or some other time. A lot of people don't come out at night. They want to come out during the day. Workshops can be done in the morning if you want to get more public comment or in the afternoons. But, you're going to have a lot of comments. So whatever works, let's get to it.
Thank you. Any additional public comments?
I did want to say that's the reason why we want to do the workshop at the beginning, because we can schedule it for an hour, whereas our site plan review, some of those things take a lot longer. And then that's another reason why I say we probably will be having additional meetings, so you guys can be kind of prepared, but we'll give you plenty of time in advance when we have those public comment meetings and time for the public to really take the time to get involved.
All right, that closes general public comments. Final board comments? Ms. Snyder?
I don't know if anybody's noticed it, but the new crosswalks have finally opened. They got activated today.
Oh, today, I was gonna ask.
Ms. Bowen?
I don't have any comment.
Ms. Conlon?
On the comp plan kind of process, it'd be nice to advertise it somehow other than just this meeting. I don't know the best way to really do that, to put it in, I don't know, a community like magazine article or things like that, so people know, other than the people who are watching this.
We're going to have signs, we're going to have a lot of advertisement for
Okay.
this process. Because again, the goal is to get as much as we can community participation. And I know just, having it on that planning board site or our agenda on the webpage won't do it. So we're definitely going to have mailers, flyers, signs, posting. It's going to be an all-out campaign.
Okay, good.
Yes.
And then I think we have to have we're supposed to have an annual report on the activities. It's just a requirement, right? And I don't know, at the beginning of the year? Don't we
Yeah,
have that
that's
every
usually,
year?
yeah.
So maybe
In
next month,
Election of officers and that sort of thing.
and we'll have a report. Okay. That's it.
Ken?
I have nothing. Thank you.
The only comment I had, I know it's been a while, but we talked about, I guess it was our last board meeting or meeting before that, about taking a look about doing a pedestrian and bike plan. Have we had any movement on that, or?
We went to commission with our pedestrian, you talking about the micro-mobility devices, or?
No, we talked about doing basically a sidewalk inventory and developing a capital improvements plan. We got a lot of sidewalks around here that are incomplete. We got a lot that need repair. We got we got a mess with bike and pedestrian mobility here.
Yes, that's Public Works, and I did talk to them. They did have a plan that they had put into place, and they said they had completed majority of the sidewalks that they had planned on. some years back, so I did get a couple of maps. I can bring those to the meeting next time and share them with you in terms of what sidewalks that was a part of that plan and what they've gotten completed up to today.
Yes, we need to be a part of that process as the planning board.
Absolutely.
And there are still a lot of sidewalks in this city that stop halfway down the block on one side and they pick up on the other side of the block. So people are having to cross mid-block if they want to stay on the sidewalk or walk in the street.
Okay. I will bring that back on our next meeting for sure.
Anything else? All right, our next board meeting is January the 8th. And with that, we are adjourned.
Are you guys good with having the workshop at the first of the?
Yeah, that would be on the agenda.
But we could adjust that if we decided it might, might be, we could adjust that if it just seems like it might work out better some other way, right?
Yes, absolutely. Be in flexible, for sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Because we don't have, we might not